Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you for taking the time to speak
Pleasure.
with us today. We're here in Gdansk, Poland at the Ukraine Recovery Conference at a moment of what seems like great optimism for Ukraine. We've seen strikes in Crimea, in Moscow, reduction in Russian progress on the front lines. Do you agree with the sentiment that Ukraine now seems to be winning this war?
Ukraine has certainly won in the Black Sea. Russia certainly doesn't have air domination over Ukraine. It can send missiles and drones, but it cannot fly freely over Ukraine. The ground war is stuck, and Ukraine seems to have gained fire control over a strategic highway from Donbas to Crimea, also over Crimea, and is conducting successful deep strikes against Russian refineries, which is affecting the Russian army's capacity to operate. So, wars are never linear. They go through phases. But it looks like the phase of Russia having the initiative has ended.
We've seen on the heels of some of these successes recently, President Zelensky request an additional $20 billion in aid. Is that something that Poland and its allies are interested in working together to grant?
Well, remember, the US is not helping Ukraine financially. We are buying with European money US equipment for Ukraine. The Ukrainian state and the Ukrainian defense industry is run thanks to financing from the European Union. Literally today, the president of the Commission said roughly 3 billion euro transfer has been sent from Brussels to Kiev, and there will be more for drone production, another 7 billion, which should make Putin recalculate. He should be asking himself, can I sustain this level of losses to the Russian economy and obviously to the Russian army for another 2 years? And if I were him, I would call it quits. But the trouble with dictators is that they always want a deal when it's past time, when it's too late.
Do you think that recent 90 billion euro loan may have forced Putin to recalculate how much he wants to pour into this war?
I think he was counting on Orban to continue blocking this loan, but Orban lost despite having support from both Russia and the United States.
Take me inside some of your conversations with Ukrainian partners right now. When you have these discussions, what are the Ukrainians telling you that they need most from Poland and from Europe more broadly?
Well, Poland is providing 90% of the transit capacity, and remember, it has to be protected from the air for what gets to Ukraine in terms of ammunition, materiel, everything. And of course, Poland, as a member of the European Union, contributes to these loans and contributes to guarantees. And Ukraine, above all, needs to rebuild its heat and electricity production capacity. The Russians are hitting civilian infrastructure, and they've managed to destroy 4/5 of Ukraine's original electricity and heat. So in the run-up to the next winter, this is a priority. And then, of course, drone production. Ukraine last year produced 4 million drones, this year even more. And this is how they compensate for Russia's bigger human capacities.
We often focus on aid from Poland and other European countries to Ukraine, but what is Poland learning or gaining from Ukraine?
We all need to learn this new phase of battle. The first drone war was actually Azerbaijan-Armenia, but this is on a completely different scale. So it's not just single drones, it's thousands of drones simultaneously being managed on a 1,200 kilometer front line. This is the war of the future, and we need to integrate lessons learned into our procurement policy, into our art of war, into our exercises, and into the equipment of our armies.
I've heard you say before that Russia has been trying to invade Poland for 500 years. You take the threat of a Russian attack very seriously. What would you say that the likelihood of Russia testing NATO's Article 5 in Poland or elsewhere is in the next 2 years?
As long as Ukraine is successfully resisting, Russia doesn't have the forces to attack NATO or to attack successfully. But Putin said something a couple of days ago saying, oh, Russia will respond if she is herself attacked from other countries. We, of course, have no such plans. So I wouldn't exclude the Russians doing some kind of false flag operation against Russian territory in order to have a pretext for hitting one of the NATO countries. We need to communicate to Putin that we know what he's up to and that we will not be taken in, and that this would be completely unacceptable, and we would defend every inch of NATO territory.
Where do you think that false flag would be? What would that look like?
I don't want to speculate, but they always hit what they think is a soft spot, which is why we need to rally around those allies who feel particularly vulnerable.
People have often speculated that the Suwalki Gap is that weak spot. Would you say that that's more protected now than it was before the war in Ukraine?
We've developed, we are spending 4.8% of our GDP on defense, more proportionally than the United States. We are building up, we have F-16s, we have F-35s, we have Abramses, we have HIMARSs, and we have an army that will fight. So, if Putin wants a fight, if Ukraine is not good enough for him, we will do what we've always done. But there are other countries that feel more vulnerable.
Which countries?
I've told you already. And Putin makes these threats against Estonia, against Latvia, against Lithuania. They are NATO, and they have our solidarity.
Poland has poured resources into the Eastern Shield fortifications. Can we expect there to be tangible progress throughout this year in those plans?
Sure, we need to take precautions. As I say, they don't have the kind of mass of forces that could threaten us. We would notice it in advance. We knew that he was massing forces around Ukraine's borders for 6 months in advance, right? It's just that people thought that he can't be so criminal and so crazy to actually do it. Now we know that Putin's intentions are as bad as some people warned. So if he starts raising his military presence around our borders, so will we. I'm more worried about a provocation.
We often hear about military preparedness to a Russian invasion, but one of the most important things that Ukraine did or learned was how to prepare their civilian populations. What sort of civil preparedness is going on in Poland right now?
So we've changed the law to make it easier to build shelters for the population in population centers. We have a territorial army, and we've sent to the entire population a kind of safety instruction. We are doing these things so that we stay as resilient as the Ukrainians. It's also an argument for renewable energy, for dispersed electricity generation. Slowly but surely, we are doing all those things that should successfully deter Putin from trying anything funny.
You spent the early part of your career shepherding Poland's accession to NATO. I know I don't have to tell you that it's been quite a year for that alliance, from President Trump's threats to invade Greenland to the threat of American troop drawdowns. How would you assess the state of NATO today?
And before that, there were European leaders who were saying that NATO is brain dead. Well, it's not brain dead now. It's European part of NATO has doubled its spending on defense since the beginning of Trump 1. And at The Hague last year, we pledged ourselves to double again, so that by the end of this decade, our European defense budget will be what the US defense budget is today. And remember, we have a much narrower mission. We only need to defend European territory, we don't have bases around the world. And for Putin to invade us, he would have to have between 3-1 and 5-1 advantage over us. He doesn't even have it today. So we are on course of being able to deter Putin with only over-the-hill support from the United States.
If you were me or another observer and you were trying to track the success of these resources being put into NATO, what are the different signposts that you would look for to say, okay, the spending is really working, we're really prepared now?
Well, we have to really invest in drone and anti-drone warfare. We need better capabilities in targeting, better capabilities in lift and mid-air refueling. And we also need to exercise our troops more intensively. You know, during the Cold War, we had this Reforge exercise, which was, moving large numbers of troops to where they were needed.
How does Ukraine fit into the future of your security architecture? Will Ukraine be a member of NATO?
Well, the Ukrainian army, 100 or so brigades, is the largest and the most experienced, battle-hardened army in Europe on our side. So yes, Ukraine will make a great ally one day.
I'm sure that you've seen, as I have living there, a lot of the innovations, not only in drone technology, but in targeting and data, the things you say that Poland needs. What are the specific things that you've seen on the Ukrainian side that Poland is learning from and partnering with to continue to build?
Well, the wire-guided drones have created a kill zone of between 30 and 50 kilometers where it's very difficult to use armor or indeed to concentrate any forces whatsoever. And then you have the mid-range drones, which are wreaking havoc on the supply lines. And then you have the long-range drones and cruise missiles, which are hitting exposed Russian targets. You know, this time Russia's size is playing against it because they just don't have enough anti-aircraft assets to protect, the Kerch Bridge and Moscow and all the armaments factories and all the airfields and so on, which is why Ukraine is being so successful. So these are the things we have to reinforce what works.
We've seen American troops withdrawn from Germany. There's about 10,000 American troops that rotate through Poland on a regular basis.
We think between 6 and 7 at the moment.
Fewer than that. Have you received assurances that those troop levels will stay more or less the same?
Well, President Trump assured our president that there would be no reductions in Poland, and this promise has been reinforced in a tweet a few weeks ago, and I understand that the Pentagon is now working on translating President Trump's decisions into logistical decisions.
Now that there seems to be some settlement in Iran, we've expected and are continuing to expect the United States to turn more of a focus back to peace discussions in Ukraine. Do you think that we could see the resumption of peace discussions to settle the war in Ukraine soon?
I'm personally of the view that it's better to allow Russia and Ukraine to negotiate directly. They negotiate over exchanges of bodies, of fallen soldiers, of POWs, and there are issues that we don't want to be pressing them to do. Today, here in Gdańsk, I met the foreign minister of Azerbaijan, and they had foreign mediators for 3 decades. And they made a deal when they started talking directly, Azerbaijan and Armenia, and the deal seems to be sticking. So I think we should encourage Putin to acknowledge Ukraine as a state, to acknowledge President Zelensky as the president of his country, and to engage in a ceasefire and a serious negotiation.
When we saw America moderate those trilateral discussions in Abu Dhabi in February, there were reports that those discussions were fairly successful as compared to other diplomatic efforts. Are you saying that you think it would be more productive if that were a bilateral summit where the United States weren't involved?
Well, certainly we Europeans are not neutral between the two sides. We are on the side of the victim of aggression, and Russia is the aggressor. And the United States also helps, not as much as in the past, but it's also helping Ukraine. We think that if Putin is ready for a ceasefire, which has been offered by Ukraine, or for a peace deal, he will find Zelensky's number.
At the conference we're at right now, President Zelensky is not here following a dispute between your two countries over the renaming of a Ukrainian military unit, an organization that's remembered here for the massacre of Polish civilians. Right now, this is a diplomatic dispute between the two countries' presidents. Could we see it evolve into something where there's material harm to the relationship the two countries have?
Well, you're right. This was an ethnic cleansing with elements of genocide. 100,000 people were killed. And, but we think that reconciliation, first of all, has to be based on truth about the past, but also is not necessarily between friends. You know, it's reconciliation's aim is not to repeat the horrible events of the past. And that is in fact the basic deal of the European Union. You know, the European Union started as a community of coal and steel between Germany and France only a few years after the bloodiest war in history. So it's not about people falling into each other's arms. It's about deciding not to repeat the bad stuff and to find a better common future. And it's in that spirit that I hope we'll be able to handle the relationship with Ukraine.
There was a rare joint appeal from both Polish and Ukrainian newspapers asking to push this dispute aside and focus on Russia as a common enemy. Did you agree with the sentiment?
I agree with the spirit, and we shouldn't allow Putin to take advantage of our disagreements.
Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.